Patricia changed the locks on my $1.2 million home on a Saturday afternoon in November, using a key my husband gave her years before that home was ever solely mine. I did not find out until Sunday evening. The sky over Savannah was that soft pink color it gets just before the streetlights come on, and I was tired the way you get tired after a long weekend with 2 kids and a husband who keeps saying he wants to drive the last leg himself. Daniel pulled into our driveway. The kids were already half asleep in the back seat. I walked up to the front door with my house key in my hand, the same brass key I had carried on the same little leather loop since 2019, and I slid it into the lock the way I had 1,000 times before. It did not turn. I pulled it out. I looked at it. I tried it again. Nothing. I tried the side door off the carport. Nothing. I tried the back door by the kitchen, where the magnolia drops its petals on the steps in spring. Nothing. 3 doors. 1 house. My house. And not a single one of my keys would turn. I stood on my own porch in November air that smelled like somebody's fireplace down the block, and I felt something settle in my chest that was not panic. It was certainty. I already knew who. I just did not yet know how far she had been willing to go. If you have ever had someone mistake your kindness for permission to cross every boundary, stay with me. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, because peace at home is worth protecting. My name is Anna Hollis. I am 46 years old. I run a small floral and event design studio out of a converted carriage house in downtown Savannah, the kind of business that lives or dies on Saturday weddings and a good repeat client list. I've been married to Daniel for 17 years. We have 2 kids, Ellis, who is 12, and Marin, who is 9, a yellow lab named Biscuit, who is afraid of the vacuum, and a 4-bedroom on a quiet street with a wraparound porch and a magnolia in the front yard that was already old when we moved in. The deed to that house has my name on it, just mine. Anna Hollis, sole owner, recorded at the Chatham County Clerk's office on October 14, 2019. There is a story behind that, and it matters, so I will tell you the short version now and the longer version later. In 2019, my father passed. He left me a piece of land outside Statesboro and a small inheritance. I sold the land. I added it to what I had saved from 12 years of running my own business, and I bought our family, the house we had been renting for 3 years, from a landlord who kept threatening to put it on the market. Daniel was between jobs at the time. He was good about it. He told me to put the deed in my name alone. He said, "That money came from your daddy and your work. The title should reflect that. We can refinance later if it matters." I love that man for a lot of reasons, and that conversation is one of them. What he did not factor in was his mother. Patricia Hollis is 69 years old. She is the kind of woman who arrives at every gathering with a casserole dish and an opinion. She wears pearl studs to the grocery store. She refers to her son as my Daniel, with the "my" pronounced like a small flag being planted. She is not a cartoon. I want to be clear about that. She has been kind to my children. She remembers their birthdays. She made Ellis a quilt when he was 4 out of all of Daniel's old t-shirts, and that quilt is still on his bed. I am not standing here telling you my mother-in-law is a monster. I am telling you she believed, deep in the place where people keep the beliefs they never examine, that her son's house was her house, and no piece of paper was going to convince her otherwise until the paper had a sheriff's department return address on it. I want to take you back to the first Sunday she walked in without knocking. That is where this really starts. It was the spring of 2020. We had just moved in. The boxes were still stacked in the dining room. I was in the kitchen in an old t-shirt and leggings, no makeup, hair in a clip, making pancakes for the kids, when I heard the front door open and close, and then her voice in the hall going, "Yoo-hoo, it's just me. Don't anybody get up?" I almost dropped the spatula. Daniel came downstairs in his sweatpants. He kissed her on the cheek like it was the most normal thing in the world. She set a foil-covered dish on my counter and said, "I figured y'all wouldn't have anything in the fridge yet, so I brought a breakfast casserole." Then she opened my cabinets, one after the other, looking for plates. I want to tell you I said something. I did not. I smiled. I poured her coffee. I told her thank you. That was so sweet. And after she left, I asked Daniel, real casual, how she got in. He said, "Oh, I gave Mama a spare a long time ago, back when we were renting. She helped us move. I just never asked for it back." That was the first boundary she treated like a suggestion. I told myself it was fine. We were a new family in a new house. His mother was a widow. She lived 20 minutes away. She was lonely. Those are all true things, and they are also the kind of true things people use to talk themselves into accepting what they should not accept. I let it go. I also told myself something else, and this is the part I am embarrassed about now, so I am going to say it out loud. I told myself that if I made a fuss about a key, I would be the difficult daughter-in-law. The cold one, the Yankee, even though I am from Macon. I had watched my own mother spend 40 years being labeled difficult inside my father's family for asking very small things, and I had promised myself, when I got married, that I would not be that woman. I did not understand yet that the women who get called difficult are usually the women who finally said something out loud that everybody else had been thinking quietly for years. Over the next 2 years, Patricia used that key, the way some people use the front door of their own home. She came by on Sundays after church, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit on my porch with a sweet tea, like she had reserved the seat. She came by on Wednesdays to pick up Ellis from school when I had a vendor meeting, and Daniel forgot to tell me he had asked her, which happened often enough that I started keeping a calendar on the fridge just to track who was supposed to be where. She came by once on a Tuesday morning when I was alone in the house with the flu, walked into my bedroom without knocking, sat on the edge of my bed, and told me that I worked too much, and that was probably why I was getting sick. There was a Saturday in the summer of 2021 I think about a lot. I had taken the kids to a swim meet at the Y. We came home in the middle of the afternoon, hair still wet, and I walked into my own kitchen to find Patricia at my sink, scrubbing my cast iron skillet with steel wool, my grandmother's cast iron skillet, the one that had been seasoned for 40 years. She looked up at me with the proud little smile of a woman doing somebody a favor and said, "Anna, this thing was filthy. You really ought to take better care of your pans." I stood there with a wet beach towel still over my arm and watched a film of black, oily water run down the drain. I did not say anything. I could not. I went into the laundry room and I cried for 2 minutes with the dryer running so the kids would not hear, and then I came back out and I poured her a glass of sweet tea and I asked her how her week had been. That skillet never came back. I tried to re-season it 3 times. It was not the same pan after that. There was a Tuesday that fall when I came home from work and found that the family calendar on the fridge, the magnetic one I had been keeping for 2 years, had been replaced. A different calendar. Same brand, same size, same magnetic strip, but all of my handwriting was gone. The new calendar had her handwriting on it. Doctor appointments she had made for the kids without asking. A reminder that Daniel's birthday dinner that year was at her house on a Saturday. I had a wedding to floral. I asked Daniel about it. He said, "Oh, Mama said the old one was getting cluttered." He said it like it was a weather report. I was 39 years old, lying in my own bed in my own house with a fever of 101, and my mother-in-law was sitting on my comforter telling me I worked too hard. Red flag number 1, if you are counting. In 2022 alone, she let herself into our house 6 separate times when neither Daniel nor I had asked her to. I know it was 6 because after the 3rd time I started writing them down in the Notes app on my phone. Date, time, what she rearranged, what she said. I did not know yet why I was keeping that list. I just knew that something in me had started keeping receipts, and I have learned to trust that something. The key was not the problem. The entitlement was. I tried to talk to Daniel about it. This is the part of the story that I think a lot of you are going to recognize, because it is rarely the in-law alone. It is the in-law and the spouse who cannot quite see what you are seeing. Daniel loved me. He loves me. But Patricia raised him alone after his father died of a heart attack when Daniel was 11, and there is a version of him that is still that little boy. And that little boy does not say no to his mama. Not really. Not in the ways that count. I would say, "Dan, I came home today and the laundry room had been rearranged." He would say, "Mama just likes to be helpful." I would say, "Dan, she walked into our bedroom while I was sick." He would say, "She was worried about you, baby. She was raised that family does not knock." I would say, "Then we need to ask her for the key back." He would go quiet. He would rub the back of his neck. He would say, "Let me handle it." And then he would not handle it. This brings me to red flag number 2. March of 2023. I was working a vendor fair at the convention center down by the river. I had been there since 6 in the morning setting up. I came home at almost 9 at night and walked into my guest room to grab a phone charger and stopped in the doorway. The whole room was different. The bed had a new duvet. There was a new lamp on the nightstand. The curtains had been changed from the cream linen ones I picked out to a heavy floral print I would never in my life have chosen. There was a small framed picture on the dresser of Daniel as a little boy on a beach with Patricia, taken before I ever knew him. I stood there with my work bag still on my shoulder. I did not call out for Daniel. I just walked downstairs, set the bag on the kitchen counter, and asked him, in the voice I use when I am trying not to scare anybody, what happened to the guest room. He looked confused for a second. Then his face did the thing his face does when he has been caught and is hoping you will not push. He said, "Oh, Mama mentioned wanting to freshen it up a little, since she stays sometimes. I told her it was fine." I asked him when. He said, "A couple weeks ago. 2 weeks." He had let his mother redecorate a room in my house, with her own duvet and her own lamp, and a picture of her and her son from before I existed. 2 weeks before he mentioned it to me. He had not asked. He had not said anything. He had let it happen. And he had let me walk in and discover it like a guest in my own house. I did not raise my voice at dinner. I saved the message. That is what I want you to hear, because it is the moment something in me changed. I did not yell. I did not cry. I went upstairs after the kids were asleep, and I opened my notes app and I wrote down the date, the time, what had been moved, and what Daniel had said. And then I did something I had not done before. I emailed myself a summary. Subject line, guest room, March 18th. Body, 3 sentences. I did it because I had a feeling, and I have learned to trust that feeling, that one day I might need to remember the exact order of how this happened, and I did not want to depend on memory or on Daniel. That email is still in my inbox. I read it again the night I got home and could not get into my own house. In the months after the guest room incident, I stopped explaining myself to Patricia. I stopped trying to win her over. I stopped offering the second cup of coffee. I was polite. I was warm with my children around. I was distant in the small ways a woman knows how to be distant when she has decided that someone has used up their seat at her table. I also did something else. I called my attorney. Her name is Renee Whitfield. She handled the closing on the house in 2019. She is a black woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a voice like a Sunday school teacher who has heard it all and will hear it again without flinching. I went to her office on a Thursday in April of 2023. I told her, plain as I could, that my mother-in-law had a key to my house, that my husband had given it to her years ago, that I had asked twice for it back and it had not been returned, and that I wanted to understand what my legal options were if it ever became a problem. Renee listened. She wrote things down. Then she said, "Anna, that house is in your name alone, and that means your mother-in-law has no legal right to enter that property without your express permission. If you ever need me to enforce that, you call me. Day or night. We will move fast." I drove home that afternoon, and I sat in my car in my own driveway for 10 minutes before I went inside. I was not crying. I was just letting the information settle. Some doors do not close loudly. They close legally. I think that was the day I understood, in a quiet way, what my next move would have to be if she ever pushed too far. That summer, I did 2 more things, and I want to mention them because they ended up mattering. I had Renee's office pull a fresh, certified copy of the deed, and I scanned it onto my phone, into a folder protected by a passcode only I knew. I updated my homeowner's insurance policy and made sure my name was the only name listed and that the address on file matched my driver's license, which it did. I added a small note to the file at the kids' pediatrician's office, indicating that Patricia was no longer authorized to bring my children in for appointments without my express written consent. I did not tell Daniel I had done any of it, not because I was hiding anything, because some things you do for yourself first, and explain later, and that is allowed. She pushed too far in November. But before I tell you about November, I have to tell you about the second open loop, because it is the part of this story I did not see coming, and it is the part that finally let me stop second-guessing myself. In late October of 2023, my sister-in-law, Daniel's younger sister Megan, came down from Charlotte for a long weekend. Megan and I have always been friendly without being close. She is 8 years younger than Daniel. She runs a small bookkeeping business and has 2 teenagers of her own and a husband who is honestly one of the kindest men I have ever met. The weekend she came down, we went out to dinner, just the 2 of us, at a place on Bay Street. And after the second glass of wine, she got quiet. And then she said, "Anna, I need to tell you something, and I do not know how to say it without making it worse." I told her to just say it. She said her mother had been calling her, on and off for almost a year, asking what Megan thought about the fact that Daniel was, quote, letting his wife keep the house in her own name. She said Patricia had told her more than once that it was not right, that a man's home should be in a man's name, that I had taken advantage of Daniel's job loss to put myself on the deed alone, and that she was, quote, working on him about it. She said her mother had been suggesting, gently at first, and then less gently, that Daniel should ask me to refinance and add him to the title, and that if I refused, that would, quote, tell him everything he needed to know about my intentions toward this family. Megan said she had told her mother to stop. Megan said she had told her, more than once, that it was none of her business, that the house was mine because I bought it with my own money, and that Daniel was a grown man who had agreed to the arrangement. She said her mother had not stopped. She had only stopped saying it to Megan and started saying it to other people. Megan had heard it from a cousin, then from Patricia's neighbor at church. Megan reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a minute. Then she turned the screen toward me. It was a text from Patricia, sent about 6 weeks earlier. The text said, "I am working on him about the house. He knows it is not right. Pray for us." There were 3 more screenshots after that one. The dates went back almost a year. One of them mentioned the guest room redecoration as, quote, "a foot in the door." Those were her exact words. A foot in the door. Megan asked me, in a quiet voice, "Do you want me to send these to you?" I told her yes. She airdropped them across the table. I felt my phone buzz in my purse. I did not look at it. I did not need to. I already knew. I sat across from my sister-in-law in a restaurant on Bay Street with shrimp and grits getting cold in front of me, and I felt something I had not felt before in this whole long mess. It was not anger, it was clarity. The little intrusions had not been little. The spare key had not been an oversight. The guest room redecoration had not been about the duvet. It had been a campaign, a slow, polite, Southern lady campaign to pressure my husband into reversing a deed I had paid for with my dead father's land. I thanked Megan. I told her I was glad she told me. I paid for dinner. I went home. I did not say a word to Daniel that night. The text was sent at 11 p.m. The deed was dated 3 years earlier. That is how I want you to remember the next part of this story, because that is what was about to happen. The week before our trip, the first weekend in November, I was wiping down the kitchen counter after dinner when I noticed a folded receipt next to the fruit bowl. It was a receipt from Carter Hardware over on Abercorn, dated that morning. I picked it up because I thought maybe Daniel had finally bought the new showerhead we had been talking about. It was not a showerhead. It was for 2 Schlage deadbolt sets and a small package of mounting screws. The total at the bottom was $184 and change. I held the receipt in my hand for a long time. Then I took it into the living room where Daniel was watching a Falcons game, and I asked him, without raising my voice, "Did you buy 2 new deadbolts today?" He looked at the receipt. He looked at me. He said, "No, I did not buy that." Then he said, "That is not my handwriting on the top. Look." And he was right. The customer name written in pen at the top of the receipt was not his. It said P. Hollis. I asked him how the receipt got on our kitchen counter. He said his mother had stopped by that afternoon to drop off some pecans from her tree, and she must have set down her purse on the counter, and the receipt must have fallen out. He said it the way he says everything when he is trying to make a thing smaller than it is. I asked him if his mother had any reason to be buying 2 deadbolts. He said, "Maybe she is replacing some at her own house." I did not argue. I folded the receipt. I took it upstairs. I put it in the same manila folder where I had been keeping every note, every email to myself, every photograph of the rearranged laundry room and the redone guest bed. I have a folder. I have had a folder since 2022. Most of the women I know have a folder, and the ones who do not, I worry about. We left for the long weekend the next Friday. Daniel had booked us a house on Tybee for 3 nights. The kids were excited. I almost did not go. Something kept tugging at me. But I told myself I was being paranoid, and I packed the dog and the kids in the cooler, and we drove out. We came home Sunday evening. You already know what I found when I tried my key. I want to walk you through what I did in the next 90 minutes, because this is the part I think a lot of women want a script for. I have been one of those women. I know what it feels like to stand on your own porch and not know what your next move is supposed to be. I did not call Daniel first. He was 20 feet away, getting the cooler out of the trunk. I could see him from where I stood. I made a decision in about 4 seconds, and I have not regretted it once. I walked back to the car. I told Daniel, calmly, that the locks on the house had been changed. His face went the color of paper. He said, "What?" He said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Let me try." I let him try. I watched him go to all 3 doors with his own key and try them and fail, and I watched the moment on his face when he understood that he already knew who, and that he was not going to be able to talk me down from it this time. I did not yell. I told him to take the kids and Biscuit to his sister's house in Pooler for the night. I told him I would call him when I needed him. He started to argue. He stopped. He looked at me, and I think for the first time in our marriage, he understood that I was not asking. He took the kids. He drove off. I sat down on my own porch step. The boards were cold under me. A neighbor 2 houses down was burning leaves in his side yard, and the smell drifted over the way it does in a Savannah November, the way it has every November I have lived here. I took out my phone. I called the Chatham County Police non-emergency line. I told the dispatcher, in a voice that surprised me with how steady it was, that I was the sole owner of a home in the historic district, that I had returned from a weekend trip to find that the locks on all 3 exterior doors of my home had been changed without my knowledge or consent, and that I needed an officer to come out and document the situation so that I could have a licensed locksmith restore my access. The dispatcher asked me if I knew who had changed the locks. I told her I had a strong suspicion but no proof, and that I would prefer to file a property access report and let the officer document the scene. She told me an officer would be out within the hour. While I waited, I did 3 things. I took photographs of all 3 doors, close-up on the locks, with timestamps. I texted my attorney Renee a 5-line summary of what I was doing. She wrote back within 4 minutes. She said, "I am awake. I am here. Do not enter the property until the officer arrives, and do not call your husband's mother tonight." I did not. I called a 24-hour locksmith I had used once 2 years earlier when Marin locked herself in the bathroom, a man named Curtis, who runs his own shop out of Garden City. I told him what I needed. He said he could be there in 45 minutes with a full set of replacement cylinders, and that he would wait until the officer cleared him to work. The officer was a woman named Sergeant Tanya Reed. She was in her late 30s, calm, professional. The kind of officer you want when you are trying very hard not to look hysterical on your own front porch. I showed her my driver's license, which still had that address on it. I pulled up a photograph of the deed on my phone, which I keep in a password-protected folder for exactly this kind of reason. I told her the whole story in about 6 minutes. No editorializing, just facts. The key. The history, the receipt, the trip, the locks. She listened. She wrote it all down. She walked the perimeter of the house with me. She took her own photographs. She filed what she called a property access report, case number, badge number, the works. She gave me a paper copy before she left. She told me, before she got back in her cruiser, that in her professional opinion, I should consult with my attorney first thing in the morning about what she called civil and possibly criminal options. She said, in a voice that was not loud, but was not soft either, "Ma'am, somebody changed the locks on a house that legally belongs only to you. That is not a family disagreement. That is a property matter, and it needs a property response." I thanked her. I shook her hand. I watched her drive away. Then, I let Curtis the locksmith get to work. He had my locks restored by 10:45 p.m. New cylinders, new keys, new strike plates on 2 of the doors, because whoever had done the original job had chewed up the wood a little around the deadbolt. He gave me 4 keys on a small ring, told me his rate, took my card, and told me, kindly, that he hoped I had a quiet night. I thanked him. I locked all 3 doors behind him. I walked through every room of my own house for the first time in 3 days, and the inside was exactly as I had left it, which somehow made it worse, because it meant she had not even bothered to come in. She had only wanted to control whether I could. I sat down at my kitchen table at almost 11 p.m. I poured myself a small glass of bourbon. I opened my laptop. I wrote Renee a long email with photographs of the receipt, the police report, the deed scan, the door photographs, and a timeline going back to 2020. I told her I wanted a formal trespass notice delivered to Patricia Hollis at her home address by close of business the next day. I told her I wanted it in writing, with the deed referenced, and I wanted it delivered in a way that left a paper trail. She wrote back at 11:17 p.m. She said, "On it, I will have the draft to you by 7 a.m. We deliver by noon. I went to bed in my own house. Daniel slept at his sister's. I texted him good night. I told him I loved him. I told him we would talk in the morning." He wrote back, "I am so sorry, Anna." I read it. I did not answer. Some things you do not answer at 11:30 at night. I want to tell you about the morning, because the morning is when the actual work happened, and it is the part I want every woman watching this to understand is possible. Renee called me at 6:52 a.m. She read the draft of the trespass notice over the phone. It was 2 pages. The first page laid out the facts. The second page cited the Chatham County deed recorded October 14, 2019, listed Anna Hollis as sole owner, and notified Patricia Hollis that effective immediately she was barred from entering the property at our address, that any future entry without my express written permission would be reported to law enforcement as criminal trespass, and that any further interference with the locks, doors, or any other access points of the property would be pursued through both criminal and civil remedies. The notice was signed by Renee as my attorney of record. She asked me if I wanted to soften any of it. I told her no. She asked me if I wanted Daniel copied. I thought about it for a long minute. I told her yes. He needed to see it in black and white at the same moment his mother did. He needed to understand that this was no longer a family conversation we could shrink down at the dinner table. The notice was delivered by a process server at 11:17 a.m. Monday morning to Patricia's front door in Ardsley Park. He handed it to her in person. He noted the time. He noted what she was wearing. She did not say anything to him. She closed the door. My phone rang at 11:22. It was Daniel. He was crying. He said, "Anna, what did you do?" I said, "Daniel, what did your mother do?" He went quiet. I told him I loved him. I told him I would see him at home that night. I told him that we were going to sit at our kitchen table, and we were going to have the conversation we should have had in 2020, and that I needed him to come ready to be a husband, not a son. He came home at 6. We sat at the kitchen table. I had made spaghetti because the kids had asked for it, and the kids were upstairs eating in front of a movie because I knew this conversation was not going to be quick. I will not give you all of it. Some of it belongs to us, but I will tell you the shape of it. I told him I was not leaving him. I told him I did not want a divorce. I told him I loved him and our family more than I had words for. And then I told him that the house was mine, that it had always been mine, that he had agreed to that in 2019 in our living room when his mama did not even know yet, and that the woman who had raised him had spent the last 3 years running a slow campaign to pressure him into changing that, and that this weekend she had crossed a line that I could not uncross for her. I told him she would never set foot in this house again. Not for Thanksgiving, not for the kids' birthdays, not for Christmas morning. If he wanted a relationship with his mother, he could have it. I would not stand between them. He could see her at her house, at restaurants, at his sister's, but she would not enter our home, and our children would not be left alone with her, and I would not pretend at family functions that nothing had happened. I told him those were not opening positions in a negotiation. Those were the terms. He cried. I cried. He told me he was ashamed. He told me he had known about the receipt. He had not bought the deadbolts, but he had known his mother was angry about the deed, and he had not protected me from her, and he was sorry. He told me he would call her in the morning, in front of me, on speakerphone, and he would tell her himself. He did. He called her at 9 the next morning. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He put it on speaker. He told his mother that he loved her. He told her that what she had done was wrong. He told her that the house was Anna's, that it had been Anna's since 2019, and that he had agreed to it because it was the right thing to do. He told her that she would not be welcome in our home again, that she would see her grandchildren only when one of us was present, and that if she contacted me directly, she would be hearing from my attorney. She did not yell. That is the part that surprised me. She got very quiet. She said, "Daniel, you cannot be serious." He said, "Mama, I am serious, and I should have been serious about this 3 years ago." She hung up on him. She has not entered our home since that Sunday night in November of 2023. It has been almost 3 years now. She has had 2 formal letters from Renee in that time, one in early 2024 when she sent a contractor to our house to give an unsolicited estimate on, of all things, a new front door, and one in the fall of 2024 when she showed up at Marin's school trying to sign her out for an early dental appointment that did not exist. The school called me before they let her near my child. They called me because I had updated the pickup authorization form the week after the lock incident, and her name was no longer on it. The school did its job. My daughter never knew. I want to tell you what life looks like now, because I think the consequence is not really the trespass notice, or the police report, or the locksmith's invoice. The consequence is the silence. The consequence is that when the magnolia drops its petals on the back steps in spring, I am the one who sweeps them up, and nobody walks into my kitchen without me opening the door. The consequence is that my children do not have to feel the small, confused feeling of seeing their grandmother undermine their mother in their own house. The consequence is that on Sunday mornings I make pancakes in my pajamas with no makeup on, and the only people in my kitchen are the people I want there. Daniel and I have done a lot of work in the last 3 years. We see a counselor in Habersham Village every other Tuesday at 4. He calls his mother on Sundays from his truck in our driveway, never from inside the house. He sees her once a month at her place. The kids see her on holidays at Megan's house in Charlotte, with both of us present. It is not the relationship anybody expected. It is the relationship that became possible after I stopped pretending that her behavior was my problem to manage. Last Christmas Eve, Patricia mailed a card to Ellis and Marin. It was a nice card. There was a $50 bill in it for each of them. There was also a folded letter to me, 3 pages, handwritten on her good stationery. I read it once. It was the closest thing to an apology I have ever gotten from her, and it was still not quite an apology in the way that women of her generation sometimes cannot quite get the word out. I read it. I folded it back up. I put it in the same manila folder with everything else. Not as evidence anymore, as history, as proof to myself that I had not imagined any of it. I have not written her back yet. Maybe I will one day, maybe I will not. The folder will keep either way. The home deed lives in a fireproof box in my closet now. The original is at Renee's office. I have not had to look at it in 2 years. I do not need to. Patricia knows what it says. Daniel knows what it says. I know what it says. The house knows what it says, in the way old houses seem to know things, because it has been quieter inside these walls since that November night, and quieter in a good way, not a sad way. I want to leave you with one thing, because I think this is the thing I wish someone had told me in 2020 when I was standing in my kitchen with a spatula in my hand and a strange woman opening my cabinets. A key is not a relationship. Access is not love. The fact that someone has been allowed into your home for years does not entitle them to your home. Kindness is a gift, and it can be withdrawn, and withdrawing it when it has been mistaken for permission is not cruelty. It is maintenance. It is the work of keeping a home a home. My name is Anna Hollis. I am the sole owner of a 4-bedroom on a quiet street in Savannah, Georgia. My door is locked tonight, and the only people who have a key are me, my husband, my 12-year-old, and my 9-year-old. That is the way it should have been from the beginning. It is the way it is now. Have your in-laws ever let themselves into your home without asking, even once, and told you it was not a big deal? I would love to hear how you handled it in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from, too. I read every single one. And if stories like this remind you that boundaries are not cruelty, subscribe to my channel for more stories. Because sometimes protecting your peace is the strongest thing you can do.